Hello Year 4, it's Mrs Dunn here with your history lesson for today. This is the third lesson in our journey so far. The journey is all about the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings invading Britain. And so far on our journey we have learnt all about the different invaders that came and settled in Britain. We've learnt about the countries where they came from, and you also made a timeline of key events. Last week we looked in real detail about why the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings chose to settle in Britain. What I'd like you to do is to pause the video and rewind your brain and write down 3 reasons why Britain was invaded by the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings. Think back to last lesson when we really looked at those reasons why. Pause the video now and then come back to me when you're done. Okay, so I've popped a few ideas onto the screen. You might have thought of some extra ideas as well, but I thought about the fact that the Vikings came to steal gold and take slaves. The better climate that we have in Britain was a big attraction, as well as the better land for farming, which then consequently gave the settlers a better way of life. And the Britons as well were also thought to be really cowardly and weak, so they were easy to attack. Well done if you thought of lots of those reasons. So our new learning for today is all about the Viking invasions and how terrifying they really were. Think about the word terrifying. It means you're frightened. If something is terrifying you, it's really scary. And we're trying to work out whether the Viking invasions were scary. Imagine you were a monk on Lindisfarne and you saw these warriors coming towards you. Just from that picture, how scared might you be? You can see they've got weapons. That's going to add to your fear. We're going to look today at lots of different sources because our learning objective today is to use historical sources, and a historical source is something that gives us information about history, and it can take lots of forms. It might be an artifact, it might be a picture, it may well be a story or a video that someone's made. So we're going to be using a range of sources today. We're going to decide what information the source gives you. So just looking at the picture on the screen, I can see straight away that these Viking warriors arrived using a longship. They've got weapons, they've got helmets, they've got swords, and they've got shields. They look very fierce. And then I'm going to interpret that information to see what it tells us about the Vikings. So I can see that they're very well prepared for that battle. And the interpretation is really similar to the skills that we use in reading when we infer something. This lesson today is part of our second inquiry. How well did the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings get along? So we know that when the Vikings invaded Britain, they wanted to settle and defeat the Anglo-Saxons. They wanted all of England to become theirs. So I wonder how that suggests they got on. So today, as part of your learning, you're going to need some of these words: inhabited, terror, suffered, pagan, race, priest, venerable, altar, destroyed, debris, holy island, monk, priory, heathens, trampled, longships and grief. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about those words as we go through the video, but if you need to look up some of those words maybe in the dictionary or online, then you can pause that video and do that now. So we're going to focus our attention today on the Viking Raid on Lindisfarne. And Lindisfarne is sometimes known as Holy Island or Lindisfarne. And if you look at the map on the screen, it's around here, okay? So it's in the very north east coast of England, in Northumberland. And this picture here is just zoomed in on the map, so you can see that Lindisfarne is its own island, okay? And you might have heard of Lindisfarne Castle. So I've got some sources here, I've got some information that we've looked at before. We've looked at the text before, but I want us to look at it again, and I want us to really drill down about what it was like when those Vikings invaded. Okay, so I'm going to start with straight away looking at the picture below. So we can see that this is the monastery. It's on fire. We can see lots of people. There are lots of Vikings with armour, with weapons, with shields. And then at the front of the picture I can see what I believe is a monk. He has no weapon. It even looks as if he has bare feet. And he is faced with this Viking warrior wielding what looks like an axe. Let's have a look at the text now. So we've looked at this text before, but I'm just going to quickly go through it just to give you some more information today. So, lo, it is for nearly 350 years that we and our fathers have inhabited this most lovely land. So inhabited is one of those key words for today. So it means they've lived there. And never before has such terror appeared in Britain. So the Vikings were described as terror appearing in Britain, as we have now suffered from a pagan race. So pagans are people that do not believe in Christianity. They believe in a different God. Nor was it thought that such an inroad from the sea could be made. So we know that the Vikings arrived in a ship, but the monasteries were built in remote places. They didn't expect this attack to happen. Behold the church of St. Cuthbert spattered with the blood of the priests of God. So spattered with blood, that shows that the attack is violent, despoiled of all its ornaments. So again, we found out last week that the Vikings stole gold and took these priests and monks as slaves. A place more venerable than all in Britain is given as a prey to pagan peoples. And if something is venerable, it means it's very precious, it's very special. The Vikings had no respect for that. They still chose to attack. So looking at the other text, when I was with you, the closeness of your love would give me great joy. In contrast, now that I am away from you, the distress of your suffering fills me daily with deep grief, when heathens desecrated God's sanctuaries and poured the blood of saints within the compass of the altar, destroyed the house of hope, trampled the bodies of saints in God's temple like animal dung in the street. So we've got the word grief here. People are grieving. It means that people who are special to them have died. So these people are grieving for the people that are lost. And actually, a very small group of Christians survived the attack, and they are writing about the grief that they now feel. They're describing the Vikings as heathens, desecrating God's sanctuaries. So this should be a place that is protected, but no, these heathens have come and desecrated it. They've destroyed it. They've poured the blood of saints. So you become a saint once you've died. So the blood of the saints, so they're now saints, and the blood from when they died has just been poured. There's no respect. Destroyed the house of our hope. This is a place where monks would pray. Okay? Monks would spend their day praying and worshipping God, reading scriptures and learning about God. Yet it's been destroyed by the Vikings and trampled the bodies of saints in God's temple like animal dung in the street. So comparing these bodies to animal poo, that just shows the extent of the damage and the destruction that these Vikings caused. So we've got now a video to watch. This video gives lots of detail about this brutal Viking raid on Lindisfarne. Okay, it's about 8 minutes long. Make any notes as you're going along if you want to.
One of the most shocking and brutal events of the early medieval period has cemented the legacy of the Vikings as a truly devastating force to be reckoned with. In 793, Vikings would land on the holy island of Lindisfarne and horrifically raid the island, cause mass slaughter, and steal all of the riches that the island had. This incident shocked most of the world, especially Christians, and is believed by some to have been the start of the Viking Age. The raid was incredibly significant as it smashed through the sacred heart of the Northumbrian kingdom and desecrated the place where Christian religion began in Britain. The Lindisfarne raid was a huge propaganda boost for the Vikings, and it meant that other groups would know their name, but also fear them. Today we look at the devastating Viking raid on Lindisfarne, and remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. In order to see why the Viking raid on Lindisfarne shocked so many people, we need to firstly look at the foundations of the area and consider why it was incredibly sacred. A monastery at Lindisfarne was founded around 634 by an Irish monk called St Aidan, who had been sent from Iona off the western coast of Scotland to Northumbria by King Oswald. Aidan set up a priory and remained here until he died in 651. However, he settled on the Holy Island in order to spread the word of Christianity. Previously, Aidan had complained that the English refused to listen to him, but his association with the king allowed him to have some success. The monastery that was established by Aidan had very few buildings according to Bede, having a church and just a cemetery. The church was most probably made from wood, and today it isn't really known where specifically this was on the island. Later the church was covered with a roof, and the walls were capped with sheets of lead. Lindisfarne became the centre for Christianity in the north of England, and missions were embarked upon by the monks to Mercia to tell the people about the word of Christianity. The patron saint of Northumbria, St Cuthbert, was a monk who would later become the abbot of the monastery, and Bede wrote about his life. Cuthbert reformed the monastic rule in the Lindisfarne community, and when he died, his body would be venerated from the shrine, becoming a huge place of pilgrimage during even the Tudor period. Miracles would allegedly occur at St Cuthbert's shrine as well. Because of this, the monastery received large gifts of money and precious objects. The monks' way of life in the monastery was dominated by a strict timetable of prayer and work, and they would spend their time reading and learning scripture by attending church services. At its peak, around 30 monks lived at Lindisfarne during the Anglo-Saxon period, but the island would be greatly populated by those who wished to learn about Christianity. During the 8th century, the monastery would become even more famous and wealthier, and it became a place of political influence and refuge, and this would become the perfect target for the Viking raid. So it was an incredibly peaceful place, and also a rather wealthy island which centred around Christianity. In 793, horror and terror would hit Holy Island. In Northumbria, there was a belief that some tragic event would take place, and this is described in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It says, "Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land of Northumbria, and woefully terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwind, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. A great famine soon followed these signs, and shortly after, in the same year, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne Island by fierce robbery and slaughter." It's accepted by most historians that the Viking raid on Lindisfarne took place on the 8th of June, 793, as this was the time of the year which was most favourable for raiding due to the conditions. The Vikings and their longships arrived on the shores of Lindisfarne. The monks who lived in the monastery and the people of the island were taken by complete surprise by the invading forces. They landed on the Holy Island and ran through the whole settlement, causing immense amounts of devastation and destruction. The houses of those people who lived outside of the monastery would have been burned down to the ground, with those inhabitants slaughtered and their wealth and riches stolen. The whole of the island would have been completely pillaged and robbed, but the worst would come inside the monastery, which remember was an incredibly important holy site. The Vikings reached the monastery and would have realised the importance of this building. Everything on the island revolved around the monastic commune, and this is where the Vikings would really strike. Inside the monastery, they would devastate the monks inside, slaughtering them with their axes in a bloodbath. Alcuin, a scholar at the time, wrote to Ethelred, the king of Northumbria, "It is nearly 350 years that we and our fathers have inhabited this most lovely land, and never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. Behold, the church of St. Cuthbert, splattered with the blood of the priests of God, despoiled of all its ornaments, a place more venerable than all in Britain, is given as prey to pagan people." The scene inside the monastery would have been horrific. The slaughter of the unarmed and peaceful men of God would have been horrendous. It's thought that the Vikings took no mercy on any of the priests or monks who lived inside the area, and all were slaughtered. Alcuin also mentioned how ornaments were stolen. The monastery would have been covered with holy relics, many of which may have been gold and worth a lot of money. The area did, as mentioned earlier, become wealthy due to the gifts which were pledged in the name of Christianity, but the Vikings would loot the whole of the riches that the monastery possessed. Alcuin would also write that the heathens poured out the blood around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. These accounts really do show the anger towards the Vikings because of the raid. Another chronicler would write of the event. In the same year, the pagans from the northern regions came with a naval force to Britain, like stinging hornets, and spread on all sides like fearful wolves, robbed, tore and slaughtered not only beasts of burden, sheep and oxen, but even priests and deacons, and companies of monks and nuns. And they came to the church of Lindisfarne, laid everything to waste with previous plundering, trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars, and seized all of the treasures of the holy church. They killed some of the brothers, took some away with them in fetters, many they drove out, naked and loaded with insults, some they drowned in the sea. The Vikings did miss one relic, however, the body of St. Cuthbert, which was later taken to a different site away from the massacre. The assault on Lindisfarne sent shockwaves all around the Christian world, and the desecration of an incredibly holy site for the murder of the people of God enhanced also the brutal reputation of the Vikings. It wasn't the first Viking raid on Britain, but following this raid, the Vikings would keep returning to England, to the point when they invaded York and captured the city. The effect on Lindisfarne would lead to the area becoming abandoned until the 12th century, when a Norman priory was built on the island. The raid on Lindisfarne was incredibly brutal and savage, but hugely effective for the Vikings. They had got what they wanted, the immense wealth of the monastery and island, the huge bloodshed which helped to spread their brutal and terrifying reputation, and also an attack on England, which they would later build upon. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.
Okay, lots and lots of information in that video, some of which we've already talked about, but really describing how brutal the attack would be. What I'd like you to do is just to think about what have the sources taught us about the Vikings. So I am going to note down just how brutal the attack was. The monks were unarmed. They stole the treasures. They also it was a surprise attack. They slaughtered the monks. They set fire to the monastery. So that's a few things that I've picked up from the sources that we've looked at today. Remember, today we are looking at the range of sources and we're deciding what that information is that we can get from that source. So what I'd like you to do today is to remember that despite this vicious attack at Lindisfarne, a small Christian community survived. I want you to imagine that you are part of that community and write a letter about the events of the day. I'd like you to use the information that you found out from the sources to write the letter, giving as much information as you can. For the scaffold today, you can use the ideas that I've just modelled to you. So they will give you a few ideas to get you started. And if you're going to challenge yourself today, I'd like you to think about how you felt during the attack rather than just giving that key information. When you've finished your letter, you can scan it and upload it to Teams for me if you want to. Pop back to me in a moment for the plenary. Good luck with your letter, Year 4, and I'll speak to you in a moment. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed finding out a little bit more about that attack on Lindisfarne today. Hopefully you've used the sources and you've used the information within those sources to help you to write your letter. Next week we are going to be back in school. So this is our final history lesson at home, and your history lesson once you're back in school is going to be all about Alfred the Great, and we're going to think about why Alfred the Great is the only king to ever be called Alfred the Great. Thanks for listening, Year 4, and I'll see you next time. Bye.